Hey, welcome to the Integrate This EdTech Podcast. I'm David Bernard, joined by co-host Jeremy Mikla. And today our special guest that we have with us is Dr. Nneka McGee. Very excited to have you join us. There's a ton of cool concepts that we became aware of through the resources and things that you have available and a lot of the work that you've done. So we're super excited to talk with you. And do you mind just telling us a little bit about kind of kicking things off and telling us about how did you get to this point before this podcast? Everything leading up to that.
Volume 1.
Yep.
First, I am so excited to be a part of this podcast, and I appreciate you both so much for, the invite. In terms of, I'll keep it as short as possible. An Ohioan, by birth, and ended up, both my parents were mathematicians, and so start there. And my mother was an administrator at the Ohio State University College of Engineering. Back then, the computers were huge, but I wanted one, and so they, for my birthday, I know I'm telling my age, but I had a IBM 5155 27-pound personal. It was supposed to be a portable computer. They had a big blue bag, and I used to lug that thing around. But back then, you had to know basic, and you had to know the code. And so I learned the code and really had a love of computers. It just so happens that I ended up teaching, math. And because of the way that I learned best, which was to have just a lot of activity, learning about a lot of new things. That was the type of learning I wanted to share with my kids when I was in the classroom. And it brought me back to computers. I mean, when I was in a school where I set up the computer lab. I had the switches. It was, I was all the things. And so I ended up bringing that to my kids. And so we used to think of lessons, and it came back to first things like RSA encryption. And I can't tell you all the crazy things, but I just started doing work with artificial intelligence, just stemming back from in the 80s. A lot of times people say like Terminator and things like that. Well, my thing was Kit, from the Knight Rider and things like that. I was so excited. And just because I started doing the work, I, ended up like, hey, I should, try to get a doctorate, do my doctoral program in AI and education. This was before ChatGPT came out, and actually 2 weeks after I had my IRB approval is when ChatGPT arrived on the scene. So that was interesting. It was interesting because I had been in a position I was a teacher, I had been an administrator, I had started 2 initiatives, AI initiatives in 2 different districts before ChatGPT came out. And because of that experience, I was able to help and support other districts, other educators, and institutions who are navigating the AI and education space. And that leads me here to you today.
Awesome. And you've been really involved with a lot of the different things that over the last 3-4 years or so, with different conferences and really highlighting a lot of the AI work that you've done. What's that experience been like for you at, given your background and your love for this kind of work? What was it like when you started to really dig into AI over the last couple of years?
Well, it's been interesting seeing kind of being a part of the world, the AI education world before ChatGPT and seeing it after ChatGPT. Um, I, I remember being a part of a panel at ISTE in 2022, and it was about AI's emerging technologies. And the individuals who I was on the panel with, we laughed because our heads were big. We thought we were doing something, and we like knew nothing. I knew about like, the periphery, right? Like I knew about GPTs, things like that in the periphery, but none of us had any idea like the speed and the magnitude of which it was going to hit. And so starting out, I was like a kid in a candy store. You have to think about this has been, something I was interested in. I, doing a lot of work and doing these initiatives. And so it was like, wow, this is great. The other part of it is that I also, because I had the doctoral work and had it, started these initiatives, I was also very cautious. And so that actually surprises people when they meet me, because I was like one who, oh yeah, we're banning ChatGPT in my district. I was a chief academic officer at the time, and people were like, we thought you were all in. And it had nothing to do with cheating, and everything at that time to do with, terms of service. And I would say, hey, are y'all reading the terms of service? Are y'all really looking at the implications? And so that part has been interesting, because some of the things that we were doing, pre November 2022 is like coming full circle. People are starting to think about the ethics more, right, of the thing. People are kind of circling back to like the pedagogical implications of, artificial intelligence. And so that's great, right? And we want to see that. But I think that has been the biggest thing, is like, yes, I've been a kid in a candy store. I'm gonna tell you the excitement. So I forgot the other part of my background that I want to share, because I'm a big Star Wars fan. So I was so excited. Like, this is how I felt, like getting that ticket a couple weeks ago. If you know, like that's how exciting, like it's been, like this is great. And I feel blessed to be able to contribute. Like, if you have told me back in 2018 that, I would be in this place due to just something that I loved, and just something I'm just working, with kids with math, I would have been like, yeah, whatever. So it's exciting. Good work, and happy to contribute.
Yeah, that's great. And as you've kind of gone around and you've spoken with district leaders, I know you mentioned your background as chief academic officer and things like that. As these changes have occurred, seeing AI as an emerging technology, have you, what is, like, where you're at currently today, what is kind of your assessment of the landscape with where schools are at? And I know, like, it's tough because everybody's in different spots and they've got, they're approaching it in different ways, but what's just your first kind of instinct about where we're at right now for schools and
So
districts?
yeah, no, thank you for the question. My first instinct is that I don't see AI as an emerging technology. I see generative AI as an emerging technology. AI, I always talk about how, for an educator, and particularly when I'm talking with leaders, their first interaction with artificial intelligence in a school will not be generative AI. It will most likely be a computer adaptive test. And so that's part of, what I try to bring to the table, is that not only, is artificial intelligence decades old, but so is artificial intelligence in education. And so I always kind of, and that's been one of the biggest um kind of things I want to make people aware of, not for any other reason than I hope it makes people feel better and less afraid that people have been working on this. There's a conference in a organization who's been around since 1989, I believe, and they're specifically dealing with this role. So that's the kind of awareness I try to bring to the table. It's like, okay, let's connect artificial intelligence with the things that are already in educational environments, so that you see it's not this big scary thing. It's something that you've been using. And now let's look at the implications of things like generative AI, because we can't shy away, from the fact that, it is here and it is very disruptive. And so that is a balance, but I think it's an important balance. And in a minute, I'm going to share with you a quote that I think is so interesting, um, from, just this whole kind of, technological. So there's this quote I love to share, and it's: the technologies of artificial intelligence, including the ability to process natural language, have the potential to bring tools to the classroom that will revitalize education. And people were like, oh, that's a great quote. And I'm like, yeah, that's from 1989. Like, people were like, what? And I'm like, yes. And it's great that it's taking time. Like, because I want people to be able to say, you can breathe. Yes, it is transformative. It is, we have to kind of rush to get some things on the table, but it's also okay to step back and do it the right way because, that is essential for our kids.
Yeah, I just when I when I listen to you, you give that quote, I'm reminded back to a movie from the 80s that I really loved at that time, Real Genius. And I
Yeah.
could just see like the really smart people in the room all getting together and they're doing all of these great things with their algorithms and they're using it to, have a big party on campus or using it to develop these lasers that are gonna like blow up the world or something, like so there's that ethical line here that you were discussing too that is definitely part of it, but also that idea that it can be very transformative when it comes to the education space. Which, when we think about it here, where do you think, as we pivot a little bit from just AI in general to the generative AI in education, where do you think teachers most often get stuck when it comes to the use, or when it comes to wanting to use AI? Is it because time constraints? Is it a confidence issue, an unfamiliarity issue, like you touched on a little bit, or just a fear that if they get it wrong, they're going to blow up the planet?
So all of the above. I am still amazed, but even now, cheating and plagiarism, basically academic integrity, is the biggest driver of why educators are hesitant to use ChatGPT and other forms of generative AI in their classrooms. The other part of it is the training, right? If you're in the ecosystem, you would think that everyone is, all AI all of the time. But there are still so many districts that have not even initiated artificial intelligence programs. And so those two factors, and if you think about educators, we don't want to present things to our kids if we do not have the familiarity, and we definitely don't want to introduce things to kids if we think they're going to use it in ways that are not appropriate. So those two factors are really driving some of the hesitation. And then lastly, it's just the unfamiliarity. I mean, I've mentioned this several times, but most recently I was talking to leaders and someone was like, "Yeah, we're not ready for the devil's tech." And I was just like, "Yeah, I'm going to when you're if that's your association, we're going to revisit, right? At another time." And then the larger implications is definitely policy. And so it's very difficult for education leaders, and I consider teachers to be leaders in their classrooms as well. But many states still don't have policies. They'll have guidelines, or here's a one pager to kind of set you on your way. But policy takes a lot of time. And that's the other kind of myth, is like when you hear AI policy and people are like, "Yeah, do AI policy in a day." And it's like, you mean year one, year two, year three? So again, it's okay that it's taking time. We need to be very careful, but at the same time recognize that those, the implications for our kids are urgent.
So given those constraints, those things where teachers are feeling less confident about, what is something that you could tell to a teacher that, and I'm going to give you a time constraint, right? That within the next 30 days that they could do to realistically help support the learning that they're providing for their students.
So I know this is crazy, but I always tell people to have a conversation, but I back it up with research from John Hattie and Visible Learning.
Mhm.
And what Hattie tells us and the research tells us is that effective questioning and discussion have an effect size. So he had a baseline effect size of zero point 0.4. And so effective questioning discussions is like 0.42 and 0.80. So what that's implicating is a year to 2 years growth just from questioning. And I think we've lost the art in some ways of conversation and questions as a vehicle for driving understanding. And so I always say you can go into a classroom, you can even reflect on your own, you can talk with your own kids if you have children to say, what do you think about artificial intelligence? What does that mean to you? And there is so much learning that can happen from a simple question that is the way I say is a best entry point. This research backed, just talk.
Right. And so that kind of, reminds me of almost like a Socratic seminar
Mhm.
that a teacher could be conducting with their students, but you invite the AI into that Socratic space so that those conversations and the continued questioning like you're talking about can continue to take place.
Yes, that's it.
Yeah. Okay.
Very simple.
No, that to me, that seems like a strategy a teacher could take even tomorrow and implement it with whatever grade level, with whatever content area that they're dealing with.
Yeah. How do you think, and maybe, yes, they might do a little background and say, if I'm teaching, well, my lens is math, but how do you think artificial intelligence relates to mathematics? Or, I mean, even broader, how do you think AI is impacting your life right now? Where do you see AI, in your
Mhm.
environment? Just such rich. I've had the best learning even before AI when I've had conversations and really had those questions, like you said, Socratic, very powerful method.
So one thing that I was going to ask you about that I found really interesting on your website is the this concept of it starts with a plate. And so I
Mhm.
wanted could you kind of explain how this is it's a really good entry point for young learners, but also it can be used with adults too to help understand um, where to start with AI literacy and learning about AI. Can you kind of explain that it starts with the plate concept?
Yes. It's actually one of my favorite activities, and it works with all ages. And it started with a mistake. But a happy mistake. I was actually looking for a image, and this is old Dali, and I was just like, hey, can I need two eyes, a nose, a face. I'm doing a paper plate. And it came back, and I'll like the rest of the story, like Paul Harvey. So basically what it is like, first of all, this powerful plate with a set of markers, and you ask your audience or your kids to follow those instructions. You start, draw eyes, draw a nose, draw, a mouth, and then always ask to hold them up. What do you see? What do you notice? Again, questioning. They all look different. Some have bigger eyes, some have smaller eyes. And so I say, what do you think would happen if you put all of these plates together and trained a machine on what a drawing a plate with a face looks like? And so you go from there, and then I put up the picture of what happened when I initially entered this in, and it's a true story. I wasn't starting to say this will be a lesson. It just, when it came up, I was like, I have to use this because the image does not have a nose, and it's like it has the exact same. I just did a screenshot, and it's just the perfect lesson to say, first of all, humans have to be in the loop, because if you didn't check, you would think, hey, the computer knows what to do, so I don't have to worry. So you need the human in the loop. You that Generative AI it is a probabilistic system, right? It is not magical. It's math. And so with that, there may be instances where different things come up, so you can have that part of the lesson. In addition, depending on what audience I'm dealing with, I also say, what if I took your plates without permission and did the same thing? How would you feel if I took your creation and used it for my programming? That's another layer of conversation. So one simple plate, a happy accident, has led to a very enriching activity. And I say, you can do this tomorrow. Anyone can go grab a stack of plates, and most teachers have markers somewhere or can find them. And again, lead with discussion.
Yeah, and that's really great. I really like the concept of like removing the technology for a little bit and let's just do this activity together. And
Mhm.
this will help us understand the concepts that we're dealing with when we actually do get over to the computer and start dealing with these large language models. And it's just a really unique way of doing that. So I know many of you may be listening on the podcast, but I'll make sure that we have the resource for it starts with a plate from your website in there because it's really cool to check out. But as far as when you start to look at like how we communicate these concepts with when we get to talking about students and AI literacy and some of these ideas that could be utilized, what do you think usually with where we're at right now? What's the best entry points for maybe like curriculum coordinators to start to encourage their teachers to build in some of these foundational concepts into their curriculum for building up AI readiness at those younger levels? What do you think the best way to do that is, or maybe what are 2 or 3 concepts or routines that they should just start to build in?
Um, Thank you for the question. Are you specific to, are you saying if I'm a curriculum coordinator, how should I be planning for our teachers to teach AI literacy? Or are you just looking for specific ideas that they could um, use with their teachers to encourage them to
Yeah, I think
incorporate AI literacy?
Yeah, so I think really any ideas that you might have, because the one thing that has been coming up in our circles is we've done digital citizenship for a long time, and a lot of times that those concepts and things can get overlooked. So is there ways that you see AI where we can not just treat it as a standalone, but what are some good ways to build it in? Maybe just more specifically focusing on some of those younger grades, like the plate idea or things like that. What are the most essential concepts that we should be teaching them so that they can just grow in their AI literacy at a younger age?
Right. So thank you. So the first thing that I'll say is using the actual technology terminology is important. So even with the littlest learner, I'm going to say artificial intelligence. Now, when I ask them to define it, they're going to say robot, but you still use the exact terminology. And depending on, and I think this was a great point that you brought up, it is essential that I don't think that AI literacy is necessarily very separate from digital literacy and media literacy. And I think um, because, like you said, they overlap. And actually, I think people would be more comfortable if we incorporate it as part of digital literacy as opposed to something separate, just because there is so much overlap. So that's one thing. For young kids, I have to tell you, I am a big proponent of hands-on activities. I Because starting with things like FERPA, like COPPA, in particular, and SEPA, and because generative AI is the emerging technology, we don't know enough about the technology. Um, I am very hesitant to recommend it for younger students. However, that doesn't mean that they cannot become aware and learn terminology. So, with that being said, I am a big proponent of hands on activities and for younger students to gain an awareness of things like artificial intelligence, the terminology itself, where they see artificial intelligence. Again, you talk about those distinctions. I think it's important, not that young kids know specifically like the different types of artificial intelligence, but just in particular that there are different types, because you don't want a student, regardless of age, to think that artificial intelligence is just generative AI. They're more likely in the home to encounter a recommender system or an what I call an AI related system, such as machine learning. And it's so interesting because If you asked someone who dealt with like machine learning or computer vision or natural language processing, which I think is okay to talk about these things, but most people who do that work do not consider themselves necessarily to be working in artificial intelligence. They say, I work in computer vision. Those distinctions, why it seems like, well, why would we discuss those things with young kids? And it's so we don't end up with misconceptions when they really do get into the work, and what they're calling artificial intelligence may be a machine learning system. Does that make sense? Just talking with them and creating activities around those distinctions.
I think so, and I think like it's interesting to hear you to mention that, call them what they are, because we've had conversations with other people that have been very much like, well, with your littles, if you need to just call AI computers, just call them computers. But for to what you're saying is they need to understand it a little bit better, and maybe beyond what is just a computer that you can word process with, or that or when even just like a mobile device, but broader than that. They need to understand some of the ideas behind what people are using AI for.
Yes, and it's okay that
Yeah.
they can create with it as well. I just think that, at a young age, and it just ties back into what is the core of what artificial intelligence is, and it's based in computer science. And with computer science, you have computational thinking. And one of the things that I tout, again, I know I'm, have a background in artificial intelligence and education, but if we could teach kids to think, it doesn't necessarily, any type of emerging technology can come into the scene, but they're able to have a level of discernment and a level of curiosity that can help them navigate whatever comes. And so I
Mhm.
think if we focus more on those thinking processes, calling it what it is, being very definite, and then starting with, again, what research says kids learn. Again, I know it's a mathematic kind of system, but start with the concrete, go to the representative, and then let's go to the abstract. Most kids at an elementary age, the concrete is best. And then as they move on, your middle school, I say that's your representative age. And then, high school, we're getting to the abstract. Those who are interested in programming and things of that nature, they can program. But yeah, the younger kids, what is artificial intelligence? What does it do in terms of, if you're wanting to be specific about the different types, that when it comes to generative AI, you're looking at, probability, what is it doing? Even with machine learning, it's being trained on large amounts of data. It's patterns and classification. It's dealing with labeling, all of the things that it does in ways that are very accessible. I do have ISTE just published a Jumpstart guide, which is a simple 6-page guide, which is intentional because we felt that there was like resistance and like, how can we get started? And it's available everywhere. But what it does is, the things that we're talking about for our younger learners, it provides specific details on what you can do and plenty of examples and resources to get started.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to take us on a little bit of a pivot here.
Okay.
And maybe there's a better word to use here, but I'm not giving it away yet. Last summer, you had a podcast series that you had released called the Detour Degree, which really kind of spotlighted unconventional paths within the realm of education, and like what inspired you to find the road less graded.
Well, first of all, I did the detour group because one of the reasons, because it's like AI all the time, and my brain is like, it's split. Like, what I know that there are other exciting, amazing things going out, because I talked to a lot of people, and I was like, what's a way during the summer? Because and you all know this,
Hmm.
um I learned a lesson, like, don't try to do things during the school year. I'm sorry, educators are busy. The plates are already full. I love the podcast and all that we learn all the time. So I don't want to take away from all the great things that everyone is doing. But what I wanted to do is say for myself and my, what I wanted to contribute is like, how can I do this during the summer? And so that is what I did. And what I wanted to do with the first year is, first of all, for it to be a limited series, but to talk about those alternative ways. Like, yes, there was a school, Optima. It's totally virtual reality school. They have thousands of students. Like, this is crazy. And the kids have the VR sets. And I'm like, okay, Adam, we have to talk. We have to talk. Quantum computing, which is coming online, like where interestingly, and I say quantum is on the same trajectory that artificial intelligence is. It's been around since, forever. I mean, it's 100 years old, but in terms of its use and applications now, it's very powerful. We don't talk about it. Now, quantum computing is totally not online, but quantum mechanics and quantum technologies are in use. So it was great not only to find a quantum physicist, because that's my other, just kind of love of just my interest level, but someone who is doing their doctoral research on quantum and artificial intelligence. Like, I was like, let's talk. This is amazing. And then just bringing it, what I call, back to earth. I also talked with an individual who does gardening, and we talked about a way that gardening could be used as a vehicle for learning. Like, so I wanted to kind of expand my own world by talking with people that are doing the things that we may not necessarily be thinking about with the detour degree.
I think that's great, and I connect with that quite a bit because, and I've mentioned this to many other people, I don't know on the show or not, but like this has been some of the best professional development doing this series with David, and all of the people that we've been able to bring on, because it's really allowed for me to see diverse perspectives, to be able to hear from individuals, including you, that are able to give insight to things that we've been thinking about for a long time, and to bring them to the forefront, and to have a podcast that you can be able to share those things out with other people, just knows that you're spreading that message to a much wider reach of people here. And so you kind of hinted at it here. Is there going to be a second season of?
Yeah, so
Oh,
I'm just
perfect.
gearing up for the second season. Now this year it's going to be a little bit different because um there are things that we're not talking about enough in the AI education space. And then too, as you may have seen, I'm out a lot and I'm on a lot of panels and doing a lot of things. And a lot of times we're like all nodding our head, like, this is great. Everyone agrees, right? And it's like, but wait a minute. In real life, there's nuance with this artificial intelligence thing, and we want to bring that to the forefront. So this year, I'm doing great debates where I'm hoping to produce 4 episodes of great debates because there are certain topics that I feel need that nuance, and it's not a drama. Like, I don't like the argument for the sake of argument. It is questioning, right? It is questioning and counter argument. Like, what are some things that people should be thinking about? The other part is of what I'm doing is dissertation work. So there's a website called Scale that Stanford supports. And they actually have collected a lot of the research. And even with all of the research studies that they've collected, only 22 of those studies have been considered values, not the right word, but has the elements that Scale was looking for in terms of things that we should be looking for in research. But there is this emerging body of work through dissertations with AI and education in particular, and in the United States. So let's be clear, in the United States, there's still not a lot of research. Like, when I first started my doctoral program in 2019, I was like, where can we find it? So I'm going to hopefully again produce 4 episodes of people who have either completed their doctoral studies or are in the midst of doing their doctoral work in AI education, so we can kind of talk about those emerging issues and again, things that people should be thinking about.
Yeah, that's really neat. And so I'm like, it's not going to be a Jerry Springer all out drama
No.
show. It's going to bring, you're going to bring together, some of the best and the brightest, and they're going to be able to kind of share what they've been working on and how it relates to the field, which to me is a much better way to spend my limited amount of time that I have as a teacher and trying to value my summer, but still trying to keep plugged into the things that are going on.
Yes. No drag out fights. No. Well, maybe one.
But,
no.
but if you happen to have those, you have to let us know, and we want to know. We want to then try to bring those people onto our program.
I'll send you the B-roll. Like, don't share it. But this was a good argument.
So I want to get a little bit into some of the things. I know we took a detour for a minute there, like literally, and it was the topic. But some of the other resources that you have on the website that are really cool. One, I've been trying to figure out and say the name correctly for like the last couple days, but I want to start with CRISP. And so you created CRISP, and basically it's like 15 ways that artificial intelligence is transforming K through 12 education. So it's this chart. Can you explain where that came from? Was that part of your dissertation work, and how did that come about?
Yeah, so it was part of my, I created it during my doctoral program. And it was just to talk about how it was transforming education. And I started using it early on in my presentations when I started talking with people about artificial intelligence in education, just for the reasons I expressed earlier, is that it was like, people were conflating Gen AI with all AI. And I was like, all right, let me bring CRISP out so we can talk about the different ways, particularly in education, that is impacting your work. And so and again, I would start with, your computer adaptive assessments or computer adaptive tests. And they were like, and I would use the example of MAP, and they're like, what? Or just AI scoring. I mean, AI scoring has been a part of assessment for decades, but they didn't call it necessarily AI scoring, but just those type of things. And so this was a way for me, or an entry point, particularly for educators, to see like it is not this big scary thing that's coming to get you and coming after your job. It's something that has been in your world for some time, and now it's just the elevation because the technology has advanced exponentially.
Yeah, and it's a good way to understand it too. And I like how you kind of have it broken down into different categories, like even just looking at things that require data, and those are search engines. And as you look at it, it's like, well, there are a combination of things that we're familiar with and some that are maybe new to us. And that's kind of, am I right in that assessment of it? Like that seems what.
Oh yeah, definitely. So, one of the things I would do is say, back when I was using this, is I would pick different programs, and I would tailor it to, like in my district, what we were using in my district that met these categories. When I would go and speak generally to audience, I would pick some general things. So, for example, when in IVE, where it's identifying needs, well, what do we use MAP for, right? To identify, needs to see progress. Well, that's a computer adaptive test, a CAT. For example, I was like, any search engine is, if you're Googling something, and even before Gemini, you start getting the Gemini results, it was still working on an AI related system. So those are the ways that I would talk about it. Then at the time, generative AI was still fairly new. So we could talk about, hey, here are these generative AI systems that are based on, and now the terms, like back then it was LLMs, then it went to foundation models. Now the terminology being used more for the same thing is general purpose AI. And so that's another reason why it's good to continue these conversations, and then to ask where there is what do you see on a framework like CRISP, where you're like, I don't know what editing software we use. It was great for me even back then to say Grammarly, and people were like, oh, but you use Grammarly, right? And it's there to help, right? It's not what, I know there's some some controversy around it now, but back then, it's just a way to show people that AI is helpful when it's used in ways that are ethical, and where you checked, we always need our guardrails. And so that's what Chris was about. I don't use it as much anymore, just because the conversation has shifted, and I've been doing a lot of work with AI for young learners, AI and inclusivity, and AI literacy to an extent, but even with AI literacy, and I don't know if you all have seen this, but there's still so much of a focus on generative AI. And I always try to find a balance, but I also want to meet the realities and needs of the school districts and the education leaders that I'm serving. And so I don't want to try to ram like Chris down their throats if they're like, we just want to know how to effectively integrate a Gen AI, program into our schools.
Yeah, and that kind of brings us into one of the other things that you created too, which, and I'm probably gonna butcher this. You'll have to help me out, but I think it's Pythagoretic table.
The Pythagoretic table.
Okay. All right. I told you. I said I would totally mess that up.
You're fine.
But yeah, so I was looking at it, and it's really cool because I like it because it's got kind of that like scientific elements feel to it, right? And it's kind of cool how basically you use that as a key for indicating certain types of different AI that you might see and what kind of supports it gives and that kind of thing. Can you talk a little bit about that and give us some more detail into how you created that? And
yeah, so first of all, what happens is that as educators, look, you get thrown a lot of tools, and people are just like, oh my gosh, use this tool and use this tool and use that tool. And I thought that it was important to kind of sift through the noise and I'm very tool agnostic. So that's another thing. Generally, I don't talk about specific tools unless it's as a like here's an example, but not let me, use this. And so because of that, what I compiled, and I've done it, I haven't done this year's yet, but for 2 years, I just compiled some of the programs in the way in which they were being used to help people navigate and the AI, what they were interested in. And so again, Pythagorean theorem this is one of my favorite shapes. And then to try to combine that with because you see so much the periodic table used to describe things. So I was like, what's a way to turn it on its head, but still use those elements? And so that is where, the inspiration behind the Pythagorean table. So again, it will, in this case, it deals with things like what are the, foundation models that are out there, not only foundation models, but the chat bots. So a lot of, the first section with this version, there's a newer version I'll have to share with you. But for the version that is still on the website, it starts with the, LLMs and the chat bots. It goes through and separates things by like language supports and academic support. Some of them may be familiar and some of them may not be familiar. Also the organizations that are driving some of the work. I call them anchor organizations, and I'm trying to, particularly now when I talk to organizations, institutions, education leaders, is just anchoring our knowledge base to the organizations that are veritable, that have been doing the work for some time. I think is important, just because there are so many definitions out there. There's still so many misconceptions out there, and I feel like if we can ground ourselves in that work, and then two, obviously some of the newer tools that are available, so that they can explore. So it just has the links color coded to what type of AI or AI related system that it is, so that people can explore. And like I said, there's a newer version, so I do change it every year, because the thing that happens is because the the nature of the ed tech world. Here today, gone tomorrow type, and or not effective, or I've heard things, and so I do make changes. And so I haven't done this year's yet, but I do need to update. I didn't realize I had not put the version from 25 on the website, so I will make sure y'all have that.
Okay, so Pythagoretic.
Pythagoretic.
Okay, I think I got it. So one of the things that's really cool about that is we run into this so often, is that we'll go out and talk with administrators and things, and they're like, well, what tool should we be using? And so I really like how you've done this in the sense that, like, breaking apart what all these similar tools do to support education, is just to support pedagogy. And you have more of it's more like a category you're picking from. It's not that you're honing in on one tool, though I know we do also have to, one of the conversations that's big for us too is just if a tool is considered data privacy safe or not. It's a big thing for our state. At least I know that's something we talk about. But I wanted to ask you one more question about this. If you were to work with a school for like 20 minutes during a staff meeting and you gave them the Pythagoretic table, what would you want them to walk away with after that time? And I realize it's not a lot of time, but.
Mm-hmm. So I've used this in trainings before, and I use what I call the rule of 3, omni trium perfectum. So I say from this list to choose 3 you already use and choose 3 you want to explore, and then have a conversation with your neighbor about what you learned. So I give them room to explore. We know this about, like, I could talk about the tools I use. That means nothing. I mean, honestly, nobody cares. And unfortunately, it's research based. Like, one of the things about research that I found was hilarious. As a district leader, like, who do people want to learn from? Do you know who was last? District leaders. I was kind of in my feelings a little bit, but it was hilarious, right? It's a humbling lesson. People want to learn from each other. And so when you're in those settings, that's what I use it for. At first I thought, okay, this could be overwhelming. So that was another reason to categorize it. And that's why I always start with first choose 3 that you already use. So now we're bringing that familiarity in, and now choose 3 you want to explore. So it kind of constrains it a little bit, makes it a lot more palpable. And then you're conversing with your neighbor. I'm always going to go back to talk.
Yeah, I think that's a great strategy to use, and it definitely is applicable for anyone doing professional development around any topic. Is take advantage of the people in the room, because I've often heard it said the smartest person in the room is the room. It is every single one of those people connecting.
Yes, definitely.
So one thing that I hear a lot from teachers and even from students, and I've had a couple of my own students that have experienced the college world with AI. One of them is 21, the other one just graduated. He's 23, but they've both had to deal with AI in their university capacity. But I know it extends down into especially that high school space. It's really about coming from the teacher and expressing their transparency about what they consider appropriate use for their course in general, or for particular activities in that course. And one of the frameworks that I saw you produce here and have put out there is the AI Creative Framework, or AI Creative Framework Indicator, which is an interesting way to share and I think be ultimately transparent about what is presented to students as acceptable for use on particular assignments or in general for a course. Can you explain that a little bit for us?
Thank you for asking about the AI Creative Framework Indicator. So again, based on my research and just based on the realities, what you're seeing a lot of is just as you mentioned. This is how you can use AI in the classroom, and they have some great skills. Leon, and I hope I'm not saying his last name incorrectly, Furzy, has a great kind of scale. You've seen like the stoplight scale of like when you can use it, when you can't use it. As you said, you have, particularly in some of the college spaces, you cannot use artificial intelligence to generate any work. But one of the greatest quotes that I just love comes from one of the superintendents I served under. And he said, "Let your conscience be your guide." I'm about empowerment. And it's like, as opposed to me setting guardrails and telling you when you can't use it, just let me know how you use it. And that's what the creative framework
Mhm.
comes from. And I didn't limit it because a lot of times it's limited to like assessment and creation of particular text-based assignments. And so I wanted to broaden it out, because if I'm using it in a creative way, let's say for artwork, digital art, or whatever, I wanted it to be, what are we creating and how are we using it? But I wanted it to be an empowering tool. And so if I was still in the classroom, I would hesitate to say, I don't trust you enough after I've given you like how to use this appropriately, when you can and cannot use it. That's such an important foundational piece. And I know we've touched on it, but I just want to emphasize, yes, they need, for what it's worth, the AI literacy. I just, again, as we talked about, I think you can wrap it up into some others and kind of, be more efficient with that. But after I've given you those type of lessons, wow, what trust can we endear in our kids if we
Mhm.
say, just let us know how you've used it. And here's this framework for you to let us know how you've used it. I think there would be a lot less anxiety and a lot less of what people, because what I'm hearing is actually, yes, you have students that are using it, but more, they're not using it to generate work. They use like LLMs, like chatbots, for search engines. Like they're looking for information. They're not looking to generate assignments. I mean, that's what I'm hearing from college students. Yes, you're
Mhm.
going to have yours, but those are the same people that were buying, like, buying the lecture notes, right? Whatever they're going to do to get ahead. It's not, the vehicle is just it's another vehicle. It's not going to stop them. If it was something else out there, they would be using it. So that's what the creative framework indicator is for. I know a couple of districts that use it. I I probably should push it out more, do some more kind of research based articles on it, just because when it started, and like I said, a couple of schools, I know one district adopted it. I need to do more with it because I think it's important. And I do use it in my work, like when I do blogs and stuff, I will put that little notation at the end. That's the other thing. I want to be very simple. I didn't want people, like, you'll see now how people have these long explanations, and I have to use it in some of my academic work where it's like, we use ChatGPT for editorial refinement, and we use this tool and this tool, as opposed to just having a simple notation. I think if it does catch on, or if some similar, it doesn't have to be this one, but if something similar that empowers our kids, and I think that will help with the trust and the transparency issues that we see so much in the space right now.
I think one of the things that I appreciated about it, as compared to, say, like that stoplight model that you had mentioned, and I've seen a lot of districts adopt that because I think it's very straightforward forward and simple for them to understand. But I think it also at the same time establishes a hierarchy with the red, the yellow, and the green, and that, one is inherently better than another, and then there's the area in the middle, and it's like we don't want to deal in the middle, so you've got to be either all in or all stop or all go, right?
Hmm.
But I think what I really like about your framework here is that as I'm looking at it here, it's hexagonal, and I'm trying to describe it a little bit for the listeners here, with different pieces, wedges coming in. Think kind of like the old Trivial Pursuit game, right? And you get the little pieces of the pie to stick in, and they're all different colors representing different things, but no color is better than any other color on there, and no wedge is inherently better than any other wedge. So you have things in there like no use of AI at all, and you have a middle area in there, and some that are just like, well, I used it here, like you had just said, for editorial purposes and with citation, and or we were co-creating this together. And I think that would be very, you talked very early on here about establishing a vocabulary. This would be a great way to establish a vocabulary to build that trust and transparency between teacher and student, to say, hey, I use this for idea generation. Or when they submit their work, saying, I used AI editing for this.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, because why not? The biggest thing, I know you've heard this too, because one of the other issues when it comes to trust in the classroom, our kids are they're smart and they're observant. And if you've been around large, especially at each level, they're looking at you all the time and seeing what you're doing. You know what they see now? They see adults using generative AI all the time. And just as we're like, ooh, that looks like AI, they know it. And they're like, oh, you're giving us an AI generated worksheet, but we can't even, pull it up. And think about what that does to the most important thing in the age of AI, the human relationship. If we cannot trust each other and the things that make us human, why would we let AI fracture that? And so again, that was the inspiration behind it. And again, to take it away from just assessment, I wanted to broaden it so that any creative could use this, because again, you're starting to see, I saw at the end of a movie that came out recently, no AI was used in this movie. Like you're having to explain. If you have to use a paragraph to explain, it's not going to have an impact in just having something that's very similar to. So the inspiration was the Creative Commons. You see it, you understand it. It is very simple. And so that was an inspiration for the AI Creative Framework indicator as well.
Awesome. Well, Nneka, thanks for all these awesome ideas and resources that we've been talking about. And I'll make sure that we link those things in the show description and everything. But we do want to get a little bit more into who you are as a person. So this is one of the things we like to do. So it's not, all serious topics and things like that. So I want to kick off our lightning round, and Jeremy and I go back and forth on these. On these, you can, as you can give us one word response, or you could like dig into it a bit further, whatever you want to do. And then we have a this or that. That one's a little bit more strict. It's just one or the other, right? So, so the first lightning round question I have for you is, what's the first detour in your life that ended up being a gift for you?
The first detour that I think is impactful is my dad taking me to see his math teacher when I was in college. And as I said, I had a career transition, and I've used that example of him thinking it was important enough, and this is in deep woods of Mississippi, to take me to see who taught him math. And then eventually I became a math teacher.
Nneka, what's a song, an artist, or even a playlist that instantly gets you into a good work groove?
So I have to tell you, I am someone who, when I am like working, I cannot have noise, if that makes sense. But when I'm in the kind of editing mode, or where it isn't requiring a lot of my cognitive load, it depends on the situation. So sometimes it could be classical, sometimes it could be rap. It depends on the mood and how I'm feeling, but I love all types of music.
All right. So this next one, if you could take a 1-week learning trip anywhere to learn about something that you don't currently know anything about, where are you going, or what are you learning about?
So I want to go on a cruise to Antarctica, and I want to do the Drake Passage, because I want to see if it's as scary as it looks. I know that's the weirdest thing, but yes, I don't know much about Antarctica, and I'm so intrigued by the Drake Passage.
I definitely wouldn't pick a cold place like Antarctica, but that's okay. That's why all different things for different people. What's a tool or a habit that most people would be, or a tool or a habit that you use that most people would be surprised to learn about?
I think that most people are surprised to learn that I do not. I love technology and I know a lot about technology, but I do not use a lot of technology. So when people are like, "Oh, just put me on your app," and I'm like, "Yeah, I have very few apps," and they're like, "What?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I mean," and then I I don't want to go Grim Reaper on them, but that's a whole nother podcast.
All right. What's one thing you're currently obsessed with learning just for fun?
um, so I know it's fun for me, but like I said, I'm learning a lot more and trying to get more education around quantum computing. Like 20 years ago, I actually wrote a manuscript about, which is so crazy because back then it was um interesting, but about a rogue quantum computer. And I actually went to like one of those pitch things, and people were like, "This is like the craziest thing ever, and it could like never happen." I mean, I was all in. I went to like Fermi Lab and in Illinois. Like I was so interested in it. Actually, I kind of like put it aside. And so now, that is coming back. And again, it started with the kids. I was working on a lesson that actually took me 2 years to create about RSA encryption, which runs, all of the things, the internets, the financial systems in terms of protection. And, when quantum computers get to a certain level, all of that's gone. They'll be able to crack RSA encryption, something that it would take, a crazed supercomputer, thousands and thousands of years, it'll be able to do, in minutes. And so, yeah, I'm so interested now that I'm back, in that world. I spend a great deal of time doing research and kind of learning more about what's going on there.
So David and I are going to have a conference, and we've hired you to come on stage to be our keynote speaker here. And before we let you out onto the stage, the sound guy wants to know, what do you want playing to pump up the audience as you step onto that stage to give your keynote? What's your walk-up song?
Gosh, what is that song? I think her name is Sia from Wonder Woman. I forget. Unstoppable. Is that what it is?
Oh, I know what you're saying.
Unstoppable. Yeah.
Unstoppable today.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. As you
Even
can
though
tell, we're big on the karaoke here too.
I know, right? I would want it, but then I'd probably be like, "No, I mean, I want it, but could you play a few little bars so they won't think I'm like big head?"
All right, that brings us into our this or that section. So you can only choose one or the other, and so I'll go through all these. Coffee or tea?
Tea.
Okay. Cook at home or eat out?
Ooh, cook at home.
Early bird or night owl?
Ooh, depends on the. I would say night owl.
Depends on if we're at ISTE or not, right?
Depends on the project. If I'm working on a project, nighttime is quiet time. So, like I told you, when it's the best time to work without a lot of, noise. But being an educator, I mean, you had to get up at, 4:30, 5 a.m. And so did that for a long time.
Okay, if you're taking a trip, podcasts or music?
No, podcast. I love listening to folks.
I would guess that Integrate This is probably the first one on there, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. I know y'all are sending me a T-shirt too.
This one's always a surprising one. We never know what people are going to say on this one, but mountains or beach?
Ooh, I love a good beach, but mountains are so, man, that clean and crisp air. That is pretty difficult, but I have to say beach.
Okay. Yeah, that's mountains is, I think, still ahead for us. Like
I think so.
2-1, I think, typically. So
I can understand. I totally can, but yeah.
And then the last one here, city adventure or nature escape?
Oh, nature escape, definitely. Which is crazy because I'm not like a big bug person, but man, I love a good just out in the woods, nature. Where my parents grew up, we still have land there in Mississippi. It's just like the best. Get
Cool.
away, be in tune with nature.
Awesome. Well, Nneka, we want to thank you again for your time, and we really appreciate you spending time with us. And is there anything that you want to plug that you have coming up, just so that we can let listeners know, conferences, anything that you want to plug?
Well, first of all, thank you again, David and Jeremy. This has been wonderful. I appreciate it. Great conversation. As I mentioned, I definitely want to shout out the AI for Young Learners, balancing tech use with authentic off-screen experiences, which is a Jumpstart guide from ISTE. I will be at ISTE this year, doing things with AI for young littles, doing a short session about quantum and how it's emerging in the education world as well. And so that will be exciting.
Great. Yeah, and hopefully we'll see you at ISTE as well, because Jeremy and I will be there. So, yeah, thanks again.
Are
We'll
y'all
be sure to-
presenting?
No.
We're just coming to take in all the festivities and sessions. So, but
Awesome.
well, thank you again, and we'll make sure we put your resources and things in our show notes for everyone to access. And yeah, we thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks.